Yo, what's up guys? Seiishizo here, and we're gonna talk about Subjugation, the monster Subjugation. It's probably content most of you guys just kind of do, but kind of don't do, and sometimes kind of forget. But this for me is kind of a guide, like, okay, which units should you use for clearing these waves, and then also clearing the bosses for each of the individual elements. And I kind of have a video on it already, but I think we can kind of maybe improve your teams on that kind of stuff as well. So this is my team for fire. Don't mind this unit that could technically be just a Poseidon or something. And this team is pretty solid. And one of the reasons that I use this team, so I'm going to go over my units. I also will look at what kind of teams that my other guildies use and then just go from there. So one of the main things in all of the teams, I actually use Grosveld. Grosveld is just on a triple fight set that I have left over. It's pretty much one of my higher damage fight sets. It's not any crazy, like, incredible set or anything. But his skill set is very useful for all of this. Because he gives 2-turn speed and 2-turn attack buff. So that in general is just very useful for this whole thing. Plus he has a skill 2 of branding that can kind of help out with the bosses as well. And he has the attack leader skill in guild. So definitely that unit is something that you might want to pick up on if you're not using that already. Another one that's pretty interesting is this thing, and that's actually something that Vayne Solidor pointed out to me. If he uses his S2, all of his S1s are going to be AoE because of this S2. So he does a lot of damage actually. And well, yeah, it's just nice damage, especially with team-ups, pretty nice. And then we have Lapis, also one of those team-up units, and then Poseidon, which I don't really use for anything else anymore that is siege related, because we're not really allowed to use it in siege for some reason. My Poseidon always won, so I am not that reason. But yeah, I would just throw all of those units, I would kind of throw leftover runes at it. But would you say like, okay, copy this team? No, actually the thing with all of this monster subjugation is look at the units that you have already built and start fitting those in. If you don't have certain units built, then okay, maybe you can check to fit them in. But let's say you have an Astar. Astar totally fits in here. Lapis is technically better, but an Astar technically definitely fits in here. A Rogue, this is my Rogue for R5. Totally works in here. If you have an Ikaru, Ikaru kind of works, but Ikaru also has a lot of downtime in his skills where he does a lot of useless skills. Another unit that I see people use a lot, which I do not have, is the Water Homunculus. I have a Fire Homunculus, so therefore I don't use that. But let's look at what other guildies have used. So we see a team like this, pretty similar to what I have. He replaces the Grosveld with a Galleon. And then these units, which are kind of similar style as what I had. I had a Poseidon in here. But yeah, I think the Water Homunculus is probably best for this, but I like my Homunculus on fire. So if you put this towards a Poseidon, it probably still works. Galleon is kind of nice. The armor break is kind of nice, but the armor break, well, I would say for the boss stages, armor breaks does help out quite some. But for the other stages, Grosveld will probably do better. As we can see over here as well, similar units on that. Pretty similar units on that, also using the Ikaru. So you see a lot of those kind of teams. Bash is slacking. Yeah, that's what you don't want to do. You don't want to go for Crow. You don't want to go for Vert. Those units really slow down your runs and therefore you don't make it to the end. So as you can see, everyone is kind of running similar teams for the Fire one. And that's also definitely what I would recommend for the Fire one. I don't see too many Poseidons. Poseidon is actually a pretty good unit because it has 2 AoE skills, and with 2 AoE skills it works out quite well. If you have a good Julie, Julie also definitely does work, because as long as your Julie is max HP, every time that she can do S3, she will do S3, which is pretty useful as well. And then Leia is also a pretty decent option. So that's mostly what we see for the Fire. I'm not gonna let it run through the whole thing. You know how the stages work, you know how the thing works. I'm more talking about the concept of like, okay, which units can I recommend you to use over here? So then for the Wind one, I use this team, which is pretty similar. My Lucian is my same Lucian from my R5 team. Or not R5 team, of course, GB12. Well, yeah, GB12, MB12, that kind of stuff. Rogue is the same thing. Grosveld is the same thing. Astar is one that I use for MB12. And then this one is the same as the other one. So with that, it's pretty chill team. I think most people will use Lucians here. Teshar is definitely something that you can use everywhere except for the Fire one. I don't have Teshar, Ruined, or Deviled. But if you have Teshar, that's definitely a good one to pick up as well. Shaina is an option. It's pretty good for armor break. So Shaina's actually not that bad because you often see at the boss stage, especially, you kind of lack the armor break to kill it fast. Another big tip, which can I do it? Well, it's just going to cost me 5 energy. Doesn't really matter. But a really big tip you definitely do not want to miss out on is you can say it in boss battle, you can attack order boss. This part is very important because that just saves you so much more time for all of these things just doing whatever. Also, just quickly to showcase like how does that work if this thing, because that's probably a unit you've never seen. So since we're in the match, moment he does S2, the moment he's picked up in a team up right now, or does any skill by itself, he will have an AoE skill, this one, and that AoE skill actually does do a lot of damage. So if you're struggling with this, that is definitely a unit you can think about of picking up, because you can see that that thing is pretty nice on the damage he does, and doesn't necessarily have too crazy of runes. He wasn't picked up with team up there. He does have to reuse his S2 sometimes. Sometimes he kind of spams S1s, which is not that great. Is this 100% going to get you the max amount of waves? No. Sometimes you just have to redo it because you're losing amputation magic in a really stupid sense or whatnot. So yeah, this is kind of how it works. I already did it on the max stage, so we don't really have to work it to the end. But as you can see, I had like a minute left for 3 stages. Would have totally worked out. So let's see what other units we see on other people. Lots of Teshars mainly. Teshar is definitely a thing that we see. If you don't have a Teshar, definitely go for that cookie, because that cookie is good. And I think the fire one is the best one for this scenario. See a bunch of Leias, Asima if you have it. This is interesting as well because this team technically is better because you don't put a 5th unit in there and then the team ups are more likely to happen. If you have a very strong Astar, you can definitely get away with that. I wouldn't really recommend to go for a team like this, like 3 units in there or like this kind of stuff. That doesn't work. It's too slow. This is too slow. Like, you don't want to aim for those units that would make it too slow. Then looking at the water one, my team is this with the Grogan. Instead of the Grogan, you would definitely want to use Teshar. If you don't have a Teshar, then you would have to look at like other options. These two are not really free to play per se, but are there free to play AoE units? Well, you can use the Water Homunculus because this is water as well. I think most of the AoE damage units on Wind are actually Shimete is a decent option actually. I don't really see too much Wind units that are AoE besides Lucian, and you cannot use duplicate. You could use Fuki, but it's not that great. So in this one, it's more like kind of depending on what kind of net 5s you have, I guess. So we will see Water Homunculus as mentioned. Lots of Teshars. Okay, this is an option as well. This is fully free to play actually, but didn't make it nevertheless. So that part is not that great. Yeah, we see a lot of Teshars, Water Homunculus. That's my team. Do we see anything else created for Wind Net 4s that do AoE stuff? Not too much. Like, it's mostly the Wind Net 5. So I guess the Water Dungeon will technically be the hardest, even though you have Lucian. Yeah, it seems that way. So that also means that most of the time we're not getting the Water boss. We are getting one of the Fire or the Wind boss, which I'll also be showing the units for that I use, and then also showing like, okay, what if the other bosses, what can you do? But let's have a quick peek at looking if there's some Wind unit AoE free to play that would be pretty nice. That's, well, you have Grossfeld in there. You could add Grossfeld with more damage. You could use this one, but it is decent for AoEs, but it's not as good. And do you really want to build a unit specifically just for this? I don't really think so. Yeah, AoEs for Wind is somewhat lacking. Like, you have a few units, but you would have to build them specifically for this dungeon, which I don't think you want to do. Like, this thing, for example, could definitely work, would probably be pretty good, but do you want to specifically build it for this? I don't think so. So in this case, it's more depending on your net 5s. If you do not have any of those net 5s, you might actually think about building a Lupinus or using a Shimete or something like that, or having that Water Homunculus. I'm not sure if this one, it doesn't have the right skills, right? No, this one doesn't have the correct skills. Only the Fire one is the good one for doing the damage. So Water Dungeon might be a little bit harder. But let's go into the bosses. So looking at the slime boss, we ended up with the fire slime boss, where I actually called that we mostly have the wind slime boss, but fire slime boss definitely works as well. So this is my team with the Minato, the Theomars, and then the Riley, and then the twins. Minato, I actually always copy the runes from my Douglas, so I have 3 units for the 3 elements that are like the core main thing that I use for counters. I mentioned that before. Definitely get in that 1 counter unit. It makes it a lot easier to get through phase 7. Everything upwards of, well, the whole boss is not hard. It's just phase 7, you want to kill it fast enough so the boss doesn't leave. So don't really care about doing as much damage as possible within the waves or within the time where you can actually hit it with defense breaks and that kind of good stuff. You don't really want to care about that stuff. You just want to care about clearing it as fast as possible in wave 7. So in this case, crit rate of Minato is the lead that I go for. And you just auto it. You definitely don't want to manual this all the time. This is definitely something that goes very slow. If you are not managing to clear the whole thing, I would just manual it from phase 6 to phase 7. And what you want to do in between phase 6 and phase 7 is actually not use your skills at the time that you can armor break it. So don't use your skills at this time. Well, then like at phase 6. But save all of your skills and then keep all of your skills the moment phase 7 hits. And then on phase 7, you can start all of your skills and actually do a lot of damage that way. So yeah, these phases, they don't do it. It just takes time. It's not hard. It legitimately just takes time. That's why I also speed up the thing by quite a bit. And okay, so phase 6. I think most people can still clear phase 6. If you cannot, you should maybe auto here or a manual here already. So this is the point where if you want to get the best run of getting all boxes, all of your loot, you maybe want to say like, okay, in this case, I stopped using skills. I don't use all of those skill 3s and that kind of stuff. And you kind of time it to say like, okay, at this moment, I will have all of my skills up. So therefore, I can start doing a lot of damage on this. So this is the point where you want to have those skill 3s in. You want to have immunity in as much as possible, because if you have immunity, you cannot get stunned and glanced and attack broken. But the main reason I use Minato here is because of the counter. Every time Minato hits, it's just a clean 40k for pretty much no reason. So, okay, 35k, a little bit less, but it's just clean damage. And actually the twins are, of course, doing by far most damage in this team. And the twins are very easy to ruin. You can ruin those twins right now with like less than 50 crit rate, simply because of Minato having a 38 crit rate lead, if I'm not mistaken. So in this case, it's pretty easy and you just clear it with the full stack. But let's look at units that I see my guildies use and other units that I recommend for the other teams. So back in the game, we already cleared it, but I noticed that we can still check the teams. And I actually noticed that most of the guildies use a team, not exactly this one. This one is okay-ish. I wouldn't really recommend to use this. Rogue is okay, but Lapis doesn't really do too much on that boss. This one is pretty nice, and this is actually what I saw like half of the guild use or even more. Bilger is insanely strong, like everyone has a Bilger rune just for R5, so that totally works. Crow technically works to add more damage, but he's bad in phase 7, because Crow's third skill is actually based off doing more damage with more harmful effects. In phase 7, you're not going to have any harmful effects, and therefore Crow is nice to add up this number higher if you already cleared phase 7, but otherwise wouldn't really recommend to use that. And I actually saw like pretty much half of the guild was very creative of all using that team kind of. Stella is actually not bad either, I would say. But Verdiheal, I don't really recommend Verdiheal, because Verdiheal just takes a lot of turns. And by taking a lot of turns, you still increase the boss of getting his turn. It's not as where you have certain speed checks or anything. It's just where you take a turn, he gets like more attack bar. So for that reason, you don't really want to take useless attack bars or useless turns where you pretty much do nothing. So we see a lot of those kind of teams. I think for your water team against fire, it's kind of clear what kind of units you should use. Another unit that I'm not entirely sure if it's good, but it actually sounds pretty good on paper, is Suiki. And Suiki actually has the passive of adding a lot extra damage or well, attack power for multiple turns. This is going to stack max at the final stage for sure. So if you ruin a Suiki with a lot of attack, he's definitely gonna do well at the end. The unit that I mainly, if you have a Devilmont, if you don't have a Devilmont, it's probably not as great. But the unit that I definitely recommend to use if you have it is the Minato. And then besides that, it's just Water Twins and a Riley. Riley is pretty much a must in all of those dungeon teams, no matter the element. So let's look at the element. Let's say you're fighting fire. or let's say you're fighting wind and you need fire, Douglas is by far your best pick because of that counter once again. Also has the 33 attack lead, which is very nice. Another nice unit is Laika. And another nice unit, I think, I haven't tried this yet, but I think this is pretty much similar style as where the Suiki is. This thing is going to max stack his attack power by a lot. If you add a lot of crit rate, crit damage to this thing should hit very hard. So that's definitely an option you can throw in there as well. Plus he cannot get stunned, which also helps out a little bit. So those are the options. You could go for Fire Twins if you have those runed up. Those are definitely not bad. Other options would be pretty much anything you have runed up that would be heavy damage on fire. That could be your Raoak, for example. That could be your Perna. Perna is an option. I've seen people use Brandia. Brandia, once again, similar to Crow. It is nice for the skill 3 to do extra damage on debuffs, but there's not going to be any debuffs in phase 7, so might be a little bit worse. Thessarians can do okay, but to be honest, I used Theomars in the previous one, and if you recheck that run, Theomars didn't actually do that much damage on like a Vio Revenge set that he's using for Siege whatever, or like, I think it's just on Guild Battle defense or something like that right now. So definitely with those units, keep in mind that they're not optimized for it. To be honest, if I just want to run a team that's perfect against this, I would go for Riley, Bilger, Douglas, Laika, and Meihoang. I think that would be the best team, and the Meihoang also on Revenge. And yeah, that's pretty much that for that. Then for the wind one, fighting the water, I think this is actually one of the harder stages because a lot of the wind units aren't that great. You could go for wind twins, of course, but they're not that great. Suiki, or not Suiki, Fuki wouldn't go for. Carbine is definitely the option you do want to go for. Would put it on Revenge, but this one has this building, like getting attack bar every time he's hit by the boss, pretty much. I think Jemire might do nice because of damage on max HP. Other options for net 5s you would have to look in, like a Dominic would probably do pretty nice. Feng Yang would do okay-ish. Well, it has the counter in there, but he tends to not do that much damage. He's better on like additional damage for like chip damage rather than going full ham on like a lot of damage kind of stuff. So those are options. I was thinking about, well, a unit like Argon probably do pretty decent as well. It's like good single target damage dealers. But also something like a Wingling, whereas the S3 will go fully on one target and the S1 can actually counter, or well, pretty much you counter because of the S3 being down. But that also makes it that Fae becomes actually pretty interesting for all of those dungeons. So you could actually rune up a Fae for all of the dungeons. Baelger works for pretty much everything except the water one. So you can actually check to have units runed up that you can use in multiple of those areas. But from the guild, we mostly notice, like I'm not entirely sure how or why, we mostly fight either the fire one or the wind one. We don't really fight the water one all too much. So that makes things a little bit easier as well. So yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it for the subjugation. Hope you learned a thing or two to maybe get your subjugation all the way to, well, all of the boxes, because these rewards are actually pretty legit. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like most of the time, this one I didn't get all of them because I slacked, but as you can see, like they have been upgrading the rewards. I've been slacking a little bit during my holidays, but as you can see, you do not get like super bad rewards from it. It's kind of worth it. Oh, this one is actually pretty boosted compared to the other ones. It's not crazy good rewards, but it's kind of minimum effort to still get in like a bunch of extra scrolls and rewards and stuff like that. So definitely do keep in mind when the subjugation is. Also discuss with your guild like when most people can hit and that kind of stuff. But definitely do subjugation and use these tips to improve it, get more free rewards. So guys, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, like and comment and subscribe. And see you in the next one. Also, let me know in the comments if you have any other teams of things that I didn't mention. Maybe I'll pin your message or reply to why. I actually read all of the messages. But let me know if I missed any units that you think are insanely good in here. And see you in the next one.